It all began when a frightened, underweight bobcat arrived at the animal refuge. Her fur was uneven, her eyes wide and unsettled, like she had witnessed too much too quickly. Unlike many animals in distress, she did not pace or growl, did not hiss or show her teeth. She simply froze in place, shaking in the farthest corner of her pen, making herself as small as possible, as if hoping to be invisible. The form with her arrival details said she had come from a struggling roadside attraction, the kind with broken fences and musty food, where animals were not given names, only numbers. Where cars and trucks drowned out the sounds of trees and wind. She was pregnant. The vet confirmed it just a few hours after she got there. Martin, the man who managed the refuge, had witnessed a lot during his 30 years of rescue work: injured hawks, starving coyotes, mountain lions left behind in closed-down homes. But this bobcat stayed with him. He stood silently outside her pen for a long while, watching her shake behind a fallen tree branch. He knew she would need more than just space and meals. She needed to feel safe. He called her Luma. Not for where she came from, but for what he hoped she could find. That evening, he brought her to his private living space at the back of the main building. The lighting there was soft, and the air carried a mild scent of hay and pinewood. What surprised him most was how she did not resist. When he opened the crate, she did not snarl or fight. She stepped out slowly, carefully, her nose sniffing the air, her ears turning with each sound. She crept to the farthest corner, stayed low, and did not move again. Martin left a plate of fresh chicken nearby, then sat across the room, staying quiet and still. He remained there until night settled and the temperature dipped. By morning, the plate was empty. The following day, Luma gave birth. No sign, no warning, no noise. Martin had gone to check on her after hearing a soft, unfamiliar cry. By the time he reached her corner, she was already curled tightly around 3 small, moving shapes. 2 of the newborns were spotted, their fur touched with shades of brown and gold. The third was so dark he looked more like a shadow than an animal. Luma gently cleaned them one by one, pulling them close with her strong front legs, her body curved protectively around them. For the first time since she had arrived, she did not appear scared. She looked like a mother. Martin did not approach them. He knew better. He watched from across the room, heart racing, and noted the moment in his journal: 3 born. Calm mother. No aggression. Positive sign. From then on, he sat near them each evening, always from a distance. Letting Luma grow used to his scent, his presence, the sound of his calm voice when he changed the water or laid down new straw. Slowly, with caution, she began to allow it. She never walked toward him, but she stopped jerking back when the door opened. She began to look at him not with fear, but with curiosity. And the cubs grew quickly. They were climbing everything: haystacks, the corner posts of the pen, even each other. They tumbled, leaped, and rolled across the floor in a blur of tiny paws and playful sounds. They were pure energy covered in fur, and Martin could not help but chuckle when they turned his boots into toys or jumped on each other with soft growls. He never gave them people names. He just called them what fit: Speckle, Shade, and Little Jumper. But they knew his voice, the sound of his footsteps. And Luma, though she never completely relaxed, began to softly purr when he came near, especially when her cubs settled against her after a long bout of play. Still, a quiet sadness stayed with her, even in calm moments. She had spent years behind metal bars, watched by strangers, with nothing to do but wait. Martin noticed it in how she kept an eye on windows, always alert, always listening. She never joined in the games but never turned away either. She stayed close, grooming them, gently nudging them when they cried or wandered too far. Then a man arrived. He was younger than most who came to adopt, maybe mid-30s, and soft-spoken. His name was Jonah. He had come in search of a rescue case for a wildlife photo project, something raw, something honest. But when he saw the cubs, he forgot about the camera. It was Elia, once called Shade, the dark cub, who came forward first. She walked straight to the front of the enclosure, pressed her small face to the wire, and stared. Jonah crouched down. She stared back. Something passed between them. He returned the next day. And the day after that. By the end of the week, he was inside the pen, completely covered in cubs. They climbed on him, pulled at his jacket, and chirped excitedly when he rolled over and played along. Martin watched from outside, arms folded, a small smile forming at the edge of his mouth. "I cannot just take one," Jonah said at last. "They are together." Martin did not hesitate. "Take them all." The paperwork was done. Permits were cleared. Jonah had already prepared a large habitat behind his cabin near the highlands, filled with trees, raised platforms, tunnels, and even a shallow pool. He had worked with wild animals before and understood what they needed. Most importantly, he promised not to train them, just to let them live as they were. On the day they left, the cubs did not pause. When the crate opened, they ran straight to Jonah like they had always belonged to him. He knelt with open arms, and they rushed into his lap in a whirl of purring fur and tiny feet. Martin stood close by, his chest tight with a mix of pride and longing. He knew this was right. Still, he missed their playful noise even before the door shut. That evening, Luma searched the pen. She sniffed along the walls, pawed at the bedding, and let out a quiet sound, not quite a cry. Martin sat near, saying nothing. He could feel her sense of loss even more strongly than his own. But instead of hiding, she looked at him. Really looked. Then she lay down in the open, resting her head on her paws, eyes full of something he could not name. Not sadness. Not grief. Maybe something closer to understanding. A week later, another man visited. This one was older. His name was Peter, a retired wildlife expert who had spent many years helping cautious wildcats in care centers around the region. He had heard about Luma from a friend and asked if he could meet her. Martin warned him, Luma was not like others. She did not care for treats or toys. She did not want contact. What she needed was space. Peter was fine with that. He brought no toys. He did not offer food. He just sat nearby. Each morning, he arrived just after sunrise, settling beside the enclosure with a thermos of coffee and a notebook resting on his knees. At times, he read out loud, gentle stories about hills, streams, and trees. Other times, he simply watched the forest ahead. Luma never came close, but she noticed him. Watched him, daily. On the 8th morning, she shifted slightly. A small step forward, a subtle change in posture. Jonah did not respond. He kept his eyes on the trees beyond, hands resting in his lap, his breath calm. Luma stopped mid-step, watching him closely. Then she lay down, paws tucked neatly under her, alert but not tense, as if she might retreat at any moment. But she stayed. By the 12th morning, she sat just 5 feet away. No barrier. No pressure. Just time. Jonah, as always, remained quiet. The edge of his mouth lifted slightly, not quite a smile, more of a quiet note of recognition. It was faint, like everything about him. Martin arrived with breakfast and found them like that, Jonah sitting cross-legged on the ground, and Luma beside him like a calm guardian. Her golden eyes were half closed, the fur along her back finally smooth. Her shoulders were at ease. Her breath steady. "She is ready," Jonah said plainly. "When you are," Martin replied, though it struck deeper than he expected. He had watched her heal, watched her change from broken to whole. He felt a deep thread of pride woven tightly with emotion. When he opened the gate, Luma did not glance his way. She waited, still and steady. And he respected that. He and Jonah worked together on the move. Every part of it was planned to feel more like a transition than a removal. The new home was more than just a space. It was a refuge. Half-covered, half-open woods, it was set at the base of a gentle slope, where deer sometimes passed and water trickled from a spring nearby. From inside, no fencing was visible. It had been built with thoughtful angles and local brush, so Luma would not feel trapped. There were trees to climb, shaded spots for hiding, and sunny clearings where golden light filtered through the leaves. Jonah had spent months getting it ready, long before meeting her. Perhaps, in some quiet way, he had been waiting for her too. When the crate opened, Luma did not run. She did not freeze. She stepped forward slowly, her body low but steady. Her nose twitched, taking in the unfamiliar scents. She moved around the nearest tree, brushing her side against its trunk. Then she moved on to another, step by step, branch by branch, She began to take ownership of the place. Jonah stayed by the gate, still, one hand resting on the post. She did not look back. That night, Martin called. "How is she?" he asked, unable to hide the concern in his voice. "She did not hide," Jonah said. "She is out there, watching the wind." That picture stayed in Martin's mind for a long time. Days passed. Then weeks. Luma changed, not in ways measured by closeness or commands. She never became tame. She did not follow anyone or purr on cue. But her world opened up. She began sleeping in open spots, sometimes on her back, legs relaxed in the air. She chased insects through the grass. She followed birds with quiet steps behind rocks. She rolled in dry leaves, stretching her body long as if testing its reach. She grew more curious, more aware. She seemed more alive than ever. Jonah gave her what she needed: routine, quiet, patience. He never invaded her space. He only entered the enclosure during expected hours, always moving with the same slow rhythm. He sometimes read to her, his voice low, almost a whisper, stories about rivers, forests, and being alone. She would sit nearby, not always looking at him, but always close. Now and then, she would lean in, gently pressing her face to the side of his boot before going back to her sunny spot without making a sound. It was not affection in the way house cats show it. It was trust, the kind that grows slowly, through quiet moments and time. Sometimes in the evening, Jonah would spot her at the top of the enclosure, resting on a high rock that overlooked the hills in the distance. The wind would lift the fur along her neck, and her eyes would sweep across the land like she was remembering a freedom she had never fully known, yet always seemed to sense. She no longer seemed trapped. She seemed grounded. She had stopped jumping at bird calls. She no longer ducked when shadows moved across the ground. She was still alert. She was a bobcat after all, but her caution came from awareness now, not fear. The kind of instinct that keeps animals sharp, not small. One day, after a steady rain, Jonah found her pawing at a shallow puddle that had formed beside a mossy patch. She touched the water, flicked it, and watched the ripples spread. Then she did it again. There was a lightness to the way she moved, almost playful, almost young again. It lasted only a few seconds, but it was real. Jonah watched from a short distance, heart full. He remembered the first time he saw her at Martin's, just a quiet shape hidden behind a log. And now here she was, curious, open, connected to her world without fear, without doubt. That day, he wrote in his notebook, "She is not just surviving. She is learning." Martin came to visit 3 months after the move. He approached quietly, not sure what to expect. Luma did not hide. She stepped out of the brush, calm and steady. She did not come forward, but she did not disappear either. Martin took that as the biggest sign of all. "She is different," he said softly. Jonah nodded. "She is who she was always meant to be." As time went on, Luma began to shape things around her. Jonah opened the sanctuary to a small number of researchers and conservation staff, people he trusted to respect the space and the rules. No noise. No contact. No attempts to make her behave differently. They observed quietly, some behind special viewing glass, others from raised platforms. They learned by watching how she moved, how she rested, how she reacted. Luma became a quiet example, not because she performed, but because she simply lived. That autumn, a fire broke out a few towns away. It was controlled quickly, but it stirred old memories. Of smoke. Of the zoo she came from. For 2 nights, Luma did not eat. She paced along the edge of the enclosure, breathing lightly. Jonah did not try to fix it. He just sat nearby, like always, sometimes reading out loud, even when she stayed hidden. On the 3rd night she returned, not close, but near enough to hear. And by morning she was back on her rock, watching the sunrise as though nothing had changed. She had learned to trust her world again. And maybe, in the quiet way wild animals do, she had learned to forgive it too. Now, nearly a year since her rescue, Luma still lives at the sanctuary. She has never been tranquilized or touched. Her health is monitored through careful watching and respect. Her home grows slowly with her, more space, more trees, more corners to explore. And with each new wind, each shift in the land, something in her seems to soften. She is not a pet. She is not a project. She is simply herself, quiet, scarred, and strong. And for Jonah, for Martin, and for everyone who has followed her path, that is more than enough. Because the bobcat who once froze in fear now greets the morning light with steady eyes. Because the animal once seen as beyond help has become proof of what recovery looks like when given patience and space. And because Luma was never meant to belong to anyone, she was always meant to be free.